Hello again. In the previous video, we took a look at the strength of our value chain, our ability to deliver on the values that our customers insist upon. In other words, the things that we have to do really well in order to capture and to keep the business. But this quickly brings us to the question of, well, what do we do if we have problems? In other words, how do we fix the weaknesses? And in this respect, there are few projects, few initiatives, few action programs in any business that are more important than this. Businesses are there simply to meet the needs of customers. It's their only real purpose in life, and when you start failing that, you're done for. So what we have to do is pay a lot of attention to this question of any weaknesses that have to be fixed. And as we think about it, there's a limited number of things we can do about such weaknesses. I can think of about four. First of all, and most positively, and the one that if at all feasible I would certainly always recommend, is that we redouble our efforts to improve what we do, to patch up the holes, to make sure that we have really addressed the weakness and that we are positioning ourselves so that we can deliver that value which our researchers have told us is very important to our customers, at least to those segments of the market that we've decided that we're going to focus on. So the first alternative, the first possibility here in confronting these weaknesses is to fix them, to put it right, to embark upon a program with all hands to the pump to put it right and to make it better. In my career, I've seen some situations where this was actually done to great effect, where a business finally faced up to a weakness that it had and brought everyone together to number one, come up with ideas, but secondly, to make the effort to make it better. And in that one particular respect, it worked very well. Okay, the second thing we can do is we can come to the conclusion that the weakness is something, it's almost something we can live with. It's there, but it's not so bad as to fatally damage our competitive posture, simply because in some other respects we are really considerably better than our competition. So we're kind of, it's a sort of disturbing acceptance of mediocrity, as it were, but it's something maybe we can live with and still have as a kind of a long-term goal to eventually close the gap as well. So that's a kind of a compromised action. The third approach that we can take, of course, is to form an alliance, form a cooperation with some other company that does have the strength in its infrastructure and its value chain to provide that value that our customers require, such that if we were equipped cooperatively with that strength which this other company has, we'd be okay. Now, in order to, of course, to entice another organization to cooperate with us, we have to have something to offer them. And it may well be that there's a complementarity possibility here, that we have something that is quite superior that they don't have at all. So, of course, the way in which to go about the solution of this sort is, first of all, to research not only the industry, but to research other industries for companies and businesses that might have what we need, and then make some sort of approach to them and proceed from there. This could be quite a long, complicated, tricky business, sometimes replete with disappointments, but nonetheless, it's a logical solution to the problem, and one that many businesses have implemented to their more or less success and satisfaction. And then finally, of course, is the sort of dismal response to the situation, which is broadly to give up. There are times when no near-term solution seems to be possible, and the company simply doesn't have the staying power or the will really to embark upon a longer-term program to put things right. And also it doesn't have the kind of optimism about its ability to do the patching up. Well, that suggests then a withdrawal. It doesn't mean that the company's finished, but it does suggest that its position in a particular market segment is probably an unviable one, and so they're just as well off to acknowledge that and to take action accordingly. So this is a tough area overall, dealing with these weaknesses. It requires honesty. Very often there are political obstacles in companies to admitting that they're not as superb as they've been telling themselves, and as the kind of the company internal PR says they are. So it's a tough one, but it's one that has to be dealt with honestly and in a kind of a logical sort of way. The notion of getting everybody on board with fixing it is absolute paramount to dealing with a problem of this sort. And but there are a few initiatives, as I said at the outset, that are more important. So good luck with it. Get on with it. Okay. There are a couple of interesting and instructive examples of this phenomenon of dealing with a weakness in the value chain. The first one is a very old history of the disposable diaper business. And one of the first entrants into this business was Procter & Gamble, the consumer goods giant. And of course, others looked at this opportunity and quickly figured out that it was going to be a huge market, and they started kind of circling the wagons, as it were, and thinking about how they could get in and keep others out. And so a battle royal was going to take place. Well, what happened was that Procter & Gamble quickly established an unassailable lead in technology. The secrecy surrounding the manufacturing process was equivalent to a military installation. They established shelf position in the retail trade, got a very good branding endeavor going with the brand Pampers, and pretty soon, one by one, large-scale healthcare and consumer goods companies, quite a few of them, about 5 of them, came in, looked around, saw what was happening, and realizing it was hopeless. After some initial efforts to provide a product and get into the business, they realized that their value chain competitiveness simply wouldn't stand up to that of Procter & Gamble, with one exception, by the way, and that's a company called Kimberly-Clark, who came up with a product called Huggies, and their rationale was to have a product that really was superior in features, which it was for a while, but they also thought that the retail trade would require kind of a second brand so that they couldn't be held hostage by a monopolistic provider. And to this day, the only brands that still exist in disposable diapers are those two, Procter & Gamble and Kimberly-Clark, and also the store brand, with the supermarket's own brand on it, where those disposable diapers are made by one or the other of those two companies. So that's a kind of a real-world example of how entrants into a business quickly decided that the prospect was hopeless and they withdrew. Another more complicated example is the mobile phone business. And the mobile phone business, when it really got going several decades ago, did so with the notion that the large manufacturing and electronics-oriented companies could do the whole job themselves, could make the phone themselves. Nokia was an example of this up in Finland. But they quickly realized that there are so many aspects to the technology of a mobile phone. There's not only the operating system, which is either Apple or Android, there are the actual software that runs the chip technology itself. It's the chips themselves. It's the manufacturing and assembly of the phone. It's the providing of the Gorilla Glass or other form of face for the phone, and there's even the marketing and product development. A lot of different aspects to the value chain in this business. And because it is such an intensely competitive business, companies quickly figured out that neither could many of them, almost any of them, do everything themselves. So they started to segment a bit and do some but not of all others. So the leader in the mobile phone business by far is Samsung, and they are about the only ones that do it all themselves. The manufacturing for most other phones is done in a very large company in Taiwan called Foxconn. I suppose you may never even have heard about them, but most of the phones are made there. And even Foxconn relies on others to provide some of the component technologies. So that's a business that has formed and reformed over the years simply in response to the competitive value chain pressures to keep customers happy. Okay, well, that's a tougher video, a tougher message, but nonetheless an essential one. I hope you liked it, and stay with me until the next one. See you then. Bye-bye.